Good morning.
Good morning. In the U.S. alone, an estimated 1 in 4 women is victim of severe physical abuse. It's an epidemic we've been looking into for months. Earlier this year, we asked viewers to send in submissions for our series, Note to Self. We found close to 100 of those notes mentioned a history of domestic violence. 2 of those women are part of this group, which ranges from a municipal judge to a former UN worker, a New York Times bestselling author, Bernie Sanders' former deputy campaign manager, and the president of a nonprofit foundation. How many of you didn't realize it was happening at first?
I mean, if you had asked me at the time, my husband was beating me on a regular basis. He had 3 guns that he kept loaded all the time. He pulled them on me, on a very regular basis. And if you had asked me if I was a battered wife, I would have said no. I'm not. I'm a strong, smart, independent woman who's in love with a troubled man. And I became increasingly ashamed that I loved him and that my love was making me vulnerable and making me go back again and again. And it wasn't until I became really convinced that he was going to kill me that I was able to leave.
A number of you feel like your abusers would have killed you.
He was going to kill me. So there was no doubt. I knew it.
Laverne, you have talked about the isolation. That your abuser made you choose between your family and him. How did that happen?
It was almost this Bonnie and Clyde mentality that it's us against the world, because that's what I was told over and over again. He became almost like my protector, right?
Right.
It's insane, the mentality that we have during the relationship, that we believe that there is nobody else. And I was ashamed.
I want to talk a little bit about that idea that you were ashamed. This horrible thing was happening to you, and yet you were the person that was embarrassed and ashamed. Rania, you're a high-powered woman in politics. Tell me about how you grappled with what was happening to you.
Not very well. Working in a predominantly male environment where I was constantly fighting for my seat at the table, where I was constantly fighting to be respected. I was terrified that someone would find out, and then the struggle that I was already having to go through in my professional life was just going to be that much worse.
At what point could you no longer keep it together?
Honestly, I don't know how long it would have lasted.
Right.
Had one of my, she's a sister, she's my friend, but she's really is my sister. She saw the bruises on me, and she called me and said, I know what's happening, and he's never gonna touch you again.
It's incredibly hard to leave somebody who has such a powerful psychological hold on you.
Well, I want to talk, it's not just psychological, right? I mean, Lisa, you endured a number of forms of abuse, including financial abuse,
Yes,
right?
that's one thing I wanted to stress, is the financial abuse. I mean, if you don't have a black eye, people think, oh, you really weren't abused. I think his jealousy, I thought at first was, that he really cared, and then it just became a point where it was like he owned me. I really felt that he believed.
That's what I felt.
Yes.
Like I was his car, like I was his property.
Exactly. I mean, if I would try to go visit my family, he would take my credit card out of my wallet. I had moved out of the house with my child. He was supposed to pay child support, pay the mortgage. He did neither for a while.
During this time, because there's so much pressure on you, did you think maybe I should just go back to him?
No, never.
You were resolute.
I was resolute.
How many of you questioned whether you had made the right decision at any point?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
I went back.
Wait, you went back?
I went back the first time. My children were small. It was more physical then than at the end. At the end, it was more verbal. But I went back. I left him for a year, and I said, well, if you promise not to hit me anymore, I'll come back to you.
Did you really think he was going to stop hitting you?
No, but I had to do something for my babies.
A lot of people hear stories of domestic abuse, and they don't understand why you stayed. They keep asking the question, well, why did you stay? How do we need to reframe that question?
I think the question would be, why does he think he can do that and get away with it?
Correct. We tend to sometimes think that we let it happen.
Right. But of course you didn't.
Of course. And the first time he slapped me, I saw stars. That's how hard he slapped me, and stormed out. And I'm sitting there, and I asked myself that question. How could you let this happen?
But of course you didn't.
And people ask,
incredibly confusing to have love and violence go together.
all in one.
And it's also textbook too to say they beat the crap out of you. And then for me, I'm sure he would then put his arms around me and say, stop crying, I'm here.
So the person who
And
damages
so-
you is also healing you.
Yeah.
Let me sort of ask one big question as we close this out. We are having this conversation against a much broader backdrop of accountability, sexual relations, sexual harassment, sexual predation, power.
Control.
Are you all more optimistic that we can put an end to domestic violence given the national conversation that we're having right now?
I am so optimistic. Journalists are listening, the media is listening, police officers, the courts, law. It's not going to change overnight, but I am tremendously optimistic.
And I'm from a very small community. Some people are going to say, why did you air your dirty laundry? And I say, if it saves one woman's life,
That's it.
then let the laundry hang out.
We reached out to Judy's ex-husband. He didn't deny the allegations and said that he believes abuse goes both ways. The National Domestic Violence Hotline told us that the first step in getting out of an abusive situation is to have a safety plan, a plan to prepare to leave, a plan when you leave, and a plan after you leave. Also, it is critically important to reach out to someone, anyone. It doesn't need to be law enforcement. It could be a friend, a family member, or even a complete stranger.
You know, it's so important that you did that, Alex. Somebody is listening to that right now,
Well,
and that's resonating with somebody right now, and that's going to help them. I remember years ago, my mom told me, love is not supposed to hurt, either
Yeah.
physically or emotionally, and I've never forgotten
And it's
that.
not your fault.
Yes.
Right. Can I underscore that? Somebody's now saying it's not just me. Just like a lot of those women who, in their note to self, you know, there's a community of people who are having the exact same experience. That piece is so important for those people to feel I am not alone, because
Tell
it's the loneliness that keeps
Yep.
you encased in those relationships. It's amazing work.
That interview threw whatever stereotype people have of an abuse victim out the
point.
window,
They are not
right?
weak,
Because
they are
are
strong, resilient,
successful,
Smart,
resilient.
educated.
It can happen to anyone.
It can.
She said it best,
Powerful.
I was in love with a troubled man. We just change our thinking about that.
Yeah, they are the aggressors.
Exactly.
Thank you. Well, the National Domestic Violence Hotline has counselors available around the clock. So if you or someone you know needs help, that number is 1-800-799-SAFE. They can help people in abusive relationships get to a safe place. You can also visit cbsthismorning.com for more safety plan tips. This was such an important segment. I'm so glad we did this.
I am too. I won't forget what they said. The one woman said the person who's loving you is also healing you at the same time. There's so many
really
conflicting
complicated.
emotions that are going on.
Yeah.
Nicely done, Alex Wagner.
Thanks.
Good to have you at the table.
Those women are the heroes.
Yes, you're right about that too.